Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight on the Integrity Systems Company Stand By What You Sell webinar, especially for goat producers. I'm Deanna Lush from Ag Communicators, and I'm helping out with facilitation for the session. So tonight is all about helping you to understand the elements of Australia's red meat integrity system and providing you with practical tips so you can stand by what you sell. The webinar is hosted by Integrity Systems Company with support nationally from the Goat Industry Council of Australia, which is the national policy body for goat producers. We have nearly 170 registrations for tonight's session, and you are joining us from every state of Australia except the NT. So it is so great to have so many of you on the call and from such a broad spread across Australia. Now, a few housekeeping items before we get going. So we are running today's session as a webinar. So this does mean that your microphone is muted and your camera is off, but we want to be very interactive. And so we welcome any questions that you might have as we go through. We have the Zoom Q&A function on. So if you move your cursor to the bottom of your screen, you'll see the Q&A button down there, or it might be up the top if you're on an iPad. So we just want you to click or tap on that one and type your question in there. We'll answer the questions as we go through each section in the presentation, and then we'll have a general Q&A at the end of the webinar. Now, if we have a significant tech issue where you can't see or hear us anymore, we'll just close the meeting off and we'll send you a new invite within 10 minutes and pick up where we left off. But fingers crossed, we are all good with internet and IT tonight. Now, to introduce who we have on tonight's session. So our presenter is Jo Gangemi, and Jo is Communications Officer with ISC. Now, she's based at Biggenden in Queensland, so just north of Brisbane. Jo has a long history in extension, having previously worked with DAF Queensland in beef extension in central and northern Queensland. So very fortunate to have Jo presenting for us this evening. We also have Kathleen Allen, and Kathleen is Communications and Evaluation Manager for ISC. She's responsible for the rollout of the communication and stakeholder engagement activities right across the organisation, and she's based on a livestock property at Yass in New South Wales. We also have Damon Holmes, and Damon is ISC's Integrity Program Manager. He's originally from a cattle property in central Queensland and now oversees the integrity system programs for ISC. We also have the key ISC product managers on the line tonight. So that's Emily Duncanson, who manages the ENVD, Lisa Barrios, who manages the Livestock Production Assurance Program, or LPA, and Dr. Don Colantonio, who manages the National Livestock Identification System, or NLIS. So we have a lot of experienced people on the call tonight, or the ISC Brains Trust, as I like to call them. So lots of practical experience in putting the integrity system into practice on their property. So if you have questions, tonight is definitely the time to ask them. Now, we also have a number of goat industry specialists on the session. The first is Katie Davies, and Katie is from the Goat Industry Council of Australia, or GICA. Katie is a pastoralist via Broken Hill and is the GICA representative on the ISC Integrity Systems Task Force. So she'll be taking questions on anything that is policy or advocacy related when it comes to the goat industry nationally. Now, we also have a familiar face from Meat and Livestock Australia, and that's Emily Litzo, who is Senior Project Officer with MLA covering the goat industry, and she's based in Brisbane. And we also have the person who was filling that role prior to Emily in Julie Petty, and Julie probably would be very well known to many of you. Julie has recently taken on a new role in ISC, so she's Project Manager Digital Supply Chains, but has many years experience working in the goat industry as well, and she's based in Brisbane. Now, this session is being recorded, and we will circulate the link in an email to you in the next 24 hours. Along with some resources just to help guide you in your use of the integrity system programs. So keep an eye out for that one. We also have a very short evaluation link at the end of the presentation. We really just want to get your feedback and understand if you find this way of receiving updates useful, and in particular, this time of the day. So would you prefer evening sessions or day sessions? So it takes only a couple of minutes, I promise, and I'll let you know when the link is in the chat ready to go. So on that note, that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Jo to start the presentation.
First slide. Hi everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight. I may have met some of you last year at the fantastic MLA Go Industry Day that was at Ipswich, or the 2 days. If I haven't met you, I'm glad you're along this evening, and hopefully we can answer some of your questions. Before we get started, I'll just run through the agenda for tonight so you've got an idea of what we're going to cover. And we'll straight up, probably the first thing we're going to look at is, who are we? The Integrity Systems Company. You've come along to find out all about what we do, so we'll cover that. The big thing is the importance, or even just describing what the red meat integrity system is. And the two big programs that make up that system are the LPA, or the Livestock Production Assurance, and the National Livestock Identification System. We'll also cover, and probably a lot of you are keen to hear, the changes that are happening to NBDs this year. And part of that suite of changes is the launch of the faster and easier new ENBD platform. And the second half of the webinar really covers a whole heap of tips and tools that to make life easier for you in navigating the integrity system, including the setting up a MyMLA account. So just an overview to give you an idea of where ISC sits within the whole red meat industry framework. I guess the very first point to note is that we are a wholly owned subsidiary of Meat and Livestock Australia. And if you sort of look how this diagram's laid out, you can see that MLA and ISC, along with a couple of other organisations, sit on the service provider level of the framework. So above us are the peak industry councils, and at the top of the tree is the Red Meat Advisory Council. I guess because MLA and ISC are sort of the face, or the producer-facing part of the whole framework, it's often assumed that MLA is setting the policy and strategy, but I think it's really important for producers to understand that your avenue, or the way that MLA and ISC work out what they're doing and focus on the things that they do, comes through those peak industry councils. And so your avenue for, directing or having some say in how levies are spent, and both MLA and ISC are levy funded with matching government funds to a point. Your avenue is through your industry council, and it's great that your representative, Katie, is on this webinar tonight. So to really hone in onto that service provider level, let's just first look at what MLA's remit, or what their role is, and it is very defined. So it's a public-facing organisation, and as I said, funded by producer levies, and the role is specific, and it is in research, development and adoption activities, and also marketing, which I'm sure you have seen quite a bit of. And we've got Emily, and previously Julie, in the role she was, providing some of that directly to the goat industry through the research development and through the extension activities. So MLA is required, and so is ISC, required to collaborate with the Australian government and wider red meat industry in fulfilling their role. And it's very important that all initiatives that they invest in must contribute to producer profitability, sustainability and global competitiveness. So what is our job as Integrity Systems Company? Well, it basically is to manage and deliver the Australia's red meat integrity system. Why do we have this job? It's because this system is the system that underpins consumer confidence in the on-farm production of Australian red meat. And that system is made up of the two big programs, which we're going to talk quite a bit about tonight. The on-farm assurance program, which is the livestock production assurance, and the identification and traceability program, which is the National Livestock Identification System. So together, we're going to talk about this word system quite a bit. So we're trying to help you get a mental picture of what the red meat integrity system is, because we talk about it a lot, and I think for a lot of producers, there are lots of different programs that they are required to be part of, but they often don't see them all together as a system, or what together those programs, what do they actually deliver together. So that's what we're hoping by the end of this presentation, you'll have a really clear picture in your mind of exactly what the red meat integrity system is. And part of what it delivers is that it ensures that our red meat is safe to eat and fully traceable. It provides that on-time assurance and animal identification and traceability from paddock, from you to the plate, to the consumer, and it underpins the livestock selling system, which gives that confidence to both to buyers, retailers, and through to consumers. So I guess though we've got those two big programs, but to start to build, to show you how it actually is worked into a system, there's how do those programs fit together. So just a little bit more background on LPA. It covers the on-farm management of food safety, animal welfare and biosecurity. It is basically our industry's tick of assurance for your product from producer to consumer. And it also demonstrates the professionalism of the industry, and it underpins our market access, the market access for Australian red meat. The thing about LPA is that it demonstrates production to an assessed standard. So we probably take for granted in Australia, because we're a first world country, that our food has been produced safely and ethically, but it's not the case in every supply chain around the world that this can be taken for granted. And when you're selling food into international markets, and the majority of red meat, goat, sheep and beef, the majority of it does go overseas, the need for these transparent, rigorous production systems that are audited is really essential for those international buyers to have confidence in purchasing our product. So on the right-hand side of that diagram, we've moved over to the NLIS, which is all about identification and traceability and tracking the location of every animal throughout its life. It is mandatory for producers, and it has been endorsed by major producer, feedlot, agent, sale yard and processor bodies. It's underpinned by state and territory legislation, and it enhances our ability, which is really important, to track livestock during disease and food safety incidents. It is the program that provides traceability through the supply chain, and that is accountability right back to the farm where the animal was raised. When you're LPA accredited, all of your on-farm records, and including your NLIS records, are auditable. So every year around 2,000 random audits and 1,000 targeted audits are conducted, and these help provide the evidence of accountability in the system. So if you're looking in the centre of that of the slide, we've got the LPA NVD, and we'll talk about how this is, as a record keeping tool, actually is the place where the two programs come together, and it ties it all together. The other common element to both on LPA and NLIS is the Property Identification Code, or PIC. You do require a PIC for both LPA and NLIS. PICs, as you will know, are managed independently by the state and territory departments of agriculture, and each state has its own PIC register, and they obviously rely on that for when the states are managing their systems internally. But incorporating that PIC into the LPA and NLIS programs is the only way that traceability and food safety then become managed at a national level. And because our industry exports so much of our product overseas, the knowledge that there is a national system that is all linked together is really, really important. So just to really put that message home of the importance of the system and of the programs, is because our industry is really, really important. It's worth a lot of money to the economy, over $28 billion annually. It provides over 400,000 people with a job, and it supports over 80,000 businesses. So that's a big chunk of Australia that is relying on this industry for their livelihood. It also supplies a lot of people their food security and protein requirements, and that's not just here. There's a lot of that is providing that protein for people all around the world. Some of the examples that are on the slide, such as mad cow disease and African swine fever, are things that have happened overseas that have really impacted on their supply chains and their ability to provide safe protein and safe meat to their consumers. And these are the things that we really want to avoid in Australia. And that's the basis of the system. We want this strong system because we want to protect our industry. The system protects our prosperity, our market access and advantage, and that is very closely tied to our reputation for providing a safe and high quality food. It supports our premium prices and positive overseas perceptions of our product. It ensures it maintains our reputation as a clean, green supplier. There are multiple producers and many properties, but the integrity system is all about delivering that one measure of quality through one integrity system. Sorry, excuse me. And it just highlights that we all have a role to play to stand by what we sell.
Now, Joe, I might hop in there. Do you need to have a momentary drink break?
Sorry, thank you.
You're okay? That's always the thing when you're presenting, isn't it? Cheeky little cough hops in the middle of it. You all good now?
Yep, good, thank you.
Awesome, back to you.
So what does LPA, we're coming on now to the two programs and exactly what they mean to you on farm. So Livestock Production Assurance Program, what does it entail? So as an LPA accredited producer, you've committed to carrying out on-farm practices that help support the integrity of the entire system. And this is verified when you go and sign your LPA MBD for your livestock movements. Yeah, if you've recently completed your LPA accreditation assessment, you'll be all over this. There are 7 requirements for LPA, including property risk assessments, which is all about making sure that there aren't, your property is free of chemical contamination or food safety risks. The safe and responsible treatment of animals, which is covers making sure that you're keeping records of what you're treating your animals with and batch number and expiry dates. Stock foods, fodder crops, grain and pasture treatment, so all about what you're feeding them is just, again, it's all about making sure that there's no chemical contaminants or nasties getting into the food system through the fodder. Preparation for dispatch of livestock, all about making sure animals are fit to load and that you've gone through all the requirements to make sure that they can travel well. Number 5 is the livestock transactions and movements, so keeping good records of what animals are coming and going, your biosecurity management and having a biosecurity plan, and your animal welfare. NLIS, what does it mean for you on farm? So basically NLIS, there's 3 elements to the program that enable that lifetime traceability that we have just been talking about and how it's so important to feed into the whole integrity system. So they are made up of the visual electronic tags that you apply to your animals, the physical location, which is the PIC number for your property or properties, and for every other place that animals go, such as sale yards and abattoirs and transit centres, and the actual transactions themselves where they're stored in that central database, the NLIS database, so that they can be tracked and traced and called upon if they're needed to be. And the LPA NVD, what does that mean for you on farm? Well, as we've mentioned, the NVD is where all of that information comes together. So it's your LPA declaration that you've done everything that you need to do for those 7 requirements on your property, and that's the basis of ensuring that the food is safe, and the basis of ensuring it's traceable is that it's tracked through the NLIS system. So because you have to do your transfers, you have to upload your transfers to the database, you reference your NVD number, so therefore all of that information comes together into that one point. So it captures the food safety information of every animal every time it moves from property to property or to processors or sale yards, and it is that evidence of livestock history and on-farm practices that gives the overseas buyers and customers the confidence that we are transferring all of that through the value chain. So we've come to the section about the NBD changes, and the motive, or what sparked this off, was that in 2019 there was a review done of the current NBD versions by SafeMeat, and that review recommended that a number of changes be made, which has resulted in the development of updated version of LPA NBDs for all species. These changes collectively will provide an easier and more efficient, cost-effective system for producers and supply chain stakeholders to interact with the integrity system. And it not only covers these changes to each NBD version, it also coincided with the release of the new ENBD system and the decommissioning of the EDEC system. So hopefully you've seen some of this out and about. So there has been advertising. I think Beef Central and Sheep Central and the major newspapers for the major agricultural newspapers have had some print advertising. So I'm hoping that this isn't the first time that you've sort of seen this information. So from the 1st of July, the new versions were released and available to order. And if you're using the ENBD, you would have that would have been available to you on the 1st of July. The current versions, so the books that you already had that were the current version up until the 1st of July, will continue to be accepted until the 31st of December. So if you don't have many NBDs left in your book, you need to get in an order. Your new one, next one that comes will be the new version, or alternatively, you can use the ENBD and that will be the new version straight away. The main thing is to be sure is that from the 1st of January that you only use the updated or the 0720 version, because that's the only one that will be accepted from the 1st of January. And just important to note that under the MLA's Accelerated Adoption Initiative, which was rolled out at Red Meat last year, there currently is no cost for NBD books until the 1st of July 2021. So just to run you through the specific changes that have been made to the goat NBD. So something that you will notice is that a destination or a place for you to record a destination pick, as well as the destination information, has been included. And if you're in WA or Tasmania, it's mandatory for you to fill in this pick. But for other states, it's optional. But on a few of the other presentations, some of the other ISC programs, operations staff have sort of said, you know, it's really, the states are very keen on for producers to be using this. It does just put that extra level of accountability and extra level of information into the NBD. So if you are able to fill it in and you're not in WA and Tasmania, I'd recommend that you do. The thing about the destination pick is you have to know what it is. So the best advice is to find it out well before you're at the yards loading the cattle. And really the easiest way is to talk to the receiver to ask them what is the pick that they require you to use. You can also, if you have an NLIS account, you can use the search pick register to look up picks. And in the ENBD, it has a really good search function to help you identify the destination pick. Just another point to note on destinations is that if you're consigning to, the consignee and the destination can be different. So for example, something that happens quite often on NBDs, an error that's made is that the stock might be consigned to the person and to their address when really they're going to a sale yards. So the agent would be, in that case, going to a sale yards. The agent would be the consignee and the destination is the sale yards and the sale yards pick. So the other thing you might notice in the layout is that it's sort of been spread out a little bit more because the agent's declaration section, which was that last part that sat under the transporter section, has been removed. So that was done in consultation with industry, and it wasn't being hardly ever used, so they didn't think it needed to stay on there. So that's given them, in the design of the NVD, a bit more room to spread everything else out and fit those new requirements in. If you have been using EDEX, I'm sure you will have received information that the EDEC system is being decommissioned. So token purchases for EDEC ended on the 30th of April. Any tokens that people had from that date through to the 31st of December can continue to be used, but from the 31st of December, the EDEC access will end. And anyone that wants to continue using an electronic system can just switch straight over to the ENVD. Well, they can do that at any time, but if they want to wait till they've used all the EDEX, then as soon as they're at that point, or when they get to the 31st of December, then they can just switch straight over to the ENVD. And I guess the cost of running two digital systems, there's not much point in doing that. So the ENVD is a lot more user-friendly. Yes, it's a change for people that are used to EDEC, but once they get the hang of it, then I'm sure that they'll realise just how much quicker things are when you're using the ENVD.
So Jo, I'm just going to hop in there.
Yep.
And just remind people that we do have the Q&A down the bottom. Now, you don't need to wait till the end to put your questions in. You can put them in right now as they come to mind. We don't want to miss any good questions. I see we've already got a couple in there, so we're going to start tapping out some answers. Just a reminder that we do have, as I said, the ISC Brains Trust on the line. So we've got obviously Damon, who oversees the integrity programs. We've got Emily for the ENVD. We've got Lisa for LPA. We've got Don for NLIS. And then we've got Katie from Geica, and then we've got Emily Litzo from Emily. Like, you got questions, we've got people who can answer them. So pop them in there. And Jo, back to you for the next section.
Thanks, Deanna. Just to point out, ISC has been working strongly with industry influencers and producers across Australia to build up the awareness, knowledge and skills in LPA and NLIS. We really want to help industry to stand by what they sell, and it's part of our strategy to communicate practical tips on how you as producers can meet your requirements of the Australian red meat industry. So this next section is all about helping you to stand by what you sell. So yeah, as I said at the start, just trying to get a mental picture of a system, and rather than all these separate things and programs and requirements, trying to get people to have the picture of how does that all fit together, and the fact that it is all connected and it has those fantastic outcomes for us in terms of market access. So that's the goal, is to get you to understand the system and all the parts that fit together. So looking at the system diagram and focusing on the LPA side of it, what are the actual things that you need to do to stand by what you sell in LPA? So the first important thing is keep your online account details up to date, because if you're not getting your notifications, if you're not finding out when your accreditation is due and those kinds of things, well then you're going to fall, things aren't going to be flowing and working properly. So make sure that your online details are up to date. You do need to maintain your LPA accreditation, which includes doing the online learning and assessment so that you fully understand LPA's requirements for livestock and property management, and that needs to be done every 3 years. Accreditation gives you more options for marketing, because it means that you can access the LPA NVD for all your livestock movements between PICs. You need to manage your livestock and property in line with the 7 LPA on-farm requirements, and you need to maintain thorough records as evidence of livestock history and on-farm practices. And as mentioned before, it is an auditable program, so you need to be prepared to undergo an audit if requested. What can you do to stand by what you sell with NLIS? Again, keep your online NLIS account details up to date. So I know the NLIS account, a lot of the account details there are a little bit out of date. I think LPA, because of the requirement to renew your accreditation every 3 years, been really lucky in getting that whole system a lot more updated. But there's some really old accounts in NLIS, and I think a lot of people forget that they need to keep things up to date there. So you're not going to receive your warning emails or notifications if you don't have the correct email address. So please, next time you're in there, make sure that that is all up to date. You obviously need to order and use NLIS tags as identifiers for every animal on your pick. And the required tags do differ a bit between states and territories, but every animal must be tagged with an accredited NLIS device before it can be moved to another pick. And that includes being moved to another property or a feedlot, sale yard or processor. You do need to record or make sure that movements of livestock are recorded in the NLIS database. And the receiver is the person responsible for completing the transfer. And I think an important thing that people might misunderstand is that when the property-to-property transfer occurs, then the receiver who receives those animals is required to do that transfer. Now, the timeframes for having, how long you've got to get that transfer onto the database do vary, so make sure you know what's required in your state. Obviously, when animals go to processors or to sale yards and things, the transfer is done for you, but if you are a property receiving or purchasing goats from another property, then you really have to do the transfer. Now, in saying that the receiver is responsible, it's still every producer's responsibility to check that the transfers are done, because in the end of the day, that the database or your part of the database is your responsibility. So even if animals are leaving your place, check that the transfer is done. And obviously, if you have animals coming onto your place, then if they're not coming from a sale yard and they're coming from another producer, you need to make sure you do the transfer. So that's basically covers regularly comparing your records to the NLIS database to make sure that what is happening is being recorded. And there is a thing called a pick reconciliation that you can complete. We really recommend trying to do one of these at least annually if you can. Basically, that just checks everything that you've got on, all the tags that you have on animals, including all the spare tags you have in the cupboard, against what the database is saying, the number of tags that it says that you should have on your property. So, if there's a big difference, then you need to start looking at how you can, bring that back to the correct number. And we do have tech tips and information about how you can do that. ISC will email you if you have discrepancies, so you will get warning emails, and it's really important that you do investigate these differences if you are notified. So something that often is asked about is the tag-free movements for goats. So in some circumstances, this is possible, and tag-free movements in the harvested or rangeland goat production system are only available if direct to slaughter or direct to registered goat depot. There's two important definitions to be aware of, and that one is the definition of the harvested rangeland goat, which is a goat that has been captured from a wild state and not born as a result of a managed breeding program and has not been subjected to any animal husbandry procedure or treatment. So that is like treatment to the animal. I think Katie has often been asked this question, so you jump in, Katie, if I'm not saying it correctly, but just putting a fence around an area and trapping animals by a fence is not considered husbandry. Husbandry is when you've actually done something specifically to the animals. The definition of a registered goat depot is a property that is used to aggregate harvested rangeland goats prior to sale and or slaughter, and it must meet the conditions in the industry NLIS standards for an operating a goat depot. Also to note, a depot that is not registered is not eligible to receive harvested rangeland goats that are not tagged or move them to slaughter tag-free. So how can you stand by what you sell with your LPA NVDs? Well, firstly, maintain your LPA accreditation so that you can continue accessing LPA LPA NVDs, because if your LPA accreditation is lapses or is cancelled, then even if you still have a hard copy LPA NVD book, they're not able to be used. So if you weren't accredited and you sent animals in on a unaccredited NVD, then they would be rejected. NVDs are a legal document. When you're ticking the boxes on the NVD, you are declaring that your on-farm practices meet LPA requirements and the customer's expectations. So importantly, that tick needs to be backed up by your accurate farm records, because basically that is your pledge that your meat has been produced safely, ethically, and meeting the biosecurity requirements. Just excuse me, sorry.
You're right, Joe. Have a break. Time out.
Thought I was well recovered from my cold, but it's coming back to haunt me.
No, all good, all good. You okay now?
Yep.
Awesome.
And importantly, file your completed NVDs in case of an audit, because NLIS transfers are part of your LPA audit. And when we start talking about the ENVD, the great advantage of them is that they are filed online for you. You don't need to worry about your paper copy unless you've filled it out and without completing it online. So the big point with NVDs is that they must be clear. So for handwritten NVDs, make sure that people can read them. They must have all the correct information, and you must complete them. As in, if you don't sign it, you don't tick a box, you leave a section uncompleted, then that is not a valid NVD. In the new NVD hard copy books, there's a whole page of tips on how, what you need to do to correctly fill out an NVD. So have a look for that if you do order hard copy books, or that NVD page is also available on our website. So we're going to go through the parts of the NVD. So part A is often where producers get things wrong or they need a hand. These are the questions all about the animal's history. And this information is crucial for food safety and market access. So the key is to stay on the safe side. And if you're not sure, then declare a risk and tick yes. So if you've bred the goats, then you can tick yes. If you've purchased some of the animal, one or more of the animals, then you have to tick no and indicate the most recent date of purchase. When it comes to tag-free movements of goats, producers should note that when uploading the transaction data to the NLS database, if they have received or sold a consignment of harvested rangeland goats that are eligible to be moved tag-free, then complete the vendor bred section on the NLS, indicate that the stock has not been bred by the owner, so select no, and the time frame, indicate less than 2 months. With chemical or veterinary treatments and withholding periods, if you can't be certain of vaccination status or treatment withholding periods or what they've been fed, then play it safe and declare the risk and tick yes. For all questions, tick yes or no, not both. So that's something that people can get confused between. They might have a consignment with 2 types of animals, so they tick yes and no, and that makes the NVD invalid. You need to check your records, and you need to definitely make sure that all animals have not been fed restricted animal material, because that is a big no-no for our food system, for our food supply chain, and that includes meat and offal, animal fats, blood, meat, bone or blood meal. With veterinary or chemical treatments, you need to check that if animals are still within a withholding period or an export slaughter interval. And if you're not sure about what those timeframes are for the chemicals that you've used, then you can access that information at the APVMA website, and that information is printed on that tips and tools page in your NVD book. Deanna, I might, you I might just see if I can hand over to Kathleen for a few slides, because I feel like my my voice is going to give way in a second.
No worry. Isn't that always the way? Just when you think you're over a good cold, it comes back. So Kathleen, we're just going to see if you can finish off this section, if that's okay.
No problems at all. So hi everyone. Joe, take a bit of a break there, and I'll just, Joe, if you're happy to still steer the prezzo, that would help. So basically here we're talking about whether or not the animals have consumed any material. So this is what they've been fed, whether or not that's have been treated with any chemicals and the like. So what you need to do is make sure that you're checking your records to see whether or not that material was still within a withholding period when it was harvested, collected or first grazed, for example. And if in doubt, or if you can't be sure, then you can apply a default 60-day withholding period to that question there. So next slide, thanks Joe. And I guess the final question for part A is the declaration. So this is a really important part of the NVD, and it's your declaration. Again, just a reminder that it is a legal document, and it's really important that you actually fill this in correctly. And because it also includes that you've met all the LPA requirements, and that the NVD is, as Joe said before, it's clear, legible, complete and correct, and that the animals also have not had any access to restricted animal materials. So just a reminder again that that it is a legal document and part of the LPA record keeping, and so can be audited. Next slide, thanks Joe. The final part of the NVD is the part B, which is the section that needs to be completed by the livestock carrier or the truckie. And the message here is don't let the truckie leave without filling in this section, and making sure that you've got your copy for your records, and therefore for any audits as required. And just a note on this next slide is regarding that mixed consignment. So if you've got different groups of animals, different history, ages, that sort of thing, different ownership within the one consignment, so on the one truck, then if you can divide them into groups based on their history, then you can do more than one NVD. However, that's only if you can identify and separate them at the other end. So if you can't identify and separate them, then you do need to do just the one NVD, but you need to take that really risk conservative approach, particularly to the answers about the animal's history, and in particular the question around the ownership and how long you've owned those animals and whether or not you bred them. And again, making sure that you take the most recent point of purchase for the whole consignment, regardless of whether or not there are some in there that you've had for much longer. Next slide, thanks Joe. So now we'll just talk a little bit about the faster and easier new ENVD system, which has been launched at the end of March this year. So the new mobile-friendly, user-centric ENVD system was developed based on feedback that ISC has sought since the launch of the initial ENVD, which was launched as an alternative to using the paper NVD book back in 2017. It's available to all LPA accredited producers, feedlots and stakeholders in the value chain, and there's a couple of reasons why we'd encourage you to use it. It's more accurate than paper forms. It ensures that it's always the latest version are being used, and therefore meets those market requirements. It reduces time and duplication spent completing livestock assurance and health declarations. So if you're filling out an animal health statement, for example, then you only need to enter that information once, and it'll automatically populate the different forms that you require. It reduces the cost of storing and retrieving any historical consignment information for auditing purposes or for reporting and admin requirements. And this was particularly evident over the bushfires earlier this year as people lost their records. So if you do have the ENVD on file, it's much easier to access those on a historical basis. You don't need to wait for the new NVD books to arrive, and stakeholders along the supply chain can log in and view consignments, including receivers of animals. So As I said, the ENVD is not just an NVD, it's a system for completing all consignment paperwork digitally, including those livestock assurance and health declarations that you may be required to provide when you're selling your goats. Now you can access the new ENVD system by logging in using your LPA credentials, so that includes your PIC, your user ID and your password to start creating those consignments. So very quickly, why is that the new ENVD version better? It's based on extensive consultation that we've conducted with many stakeholders across the supply chain over the last 12 to 18 months. It's undergone rigorous testing, including by producers and the feedlot sector. There's capacity to print at any time, even when it is incomplete. There's unlimited space for livestock descriptions now within the consignment section. You're able to draw a signature or a brand using a touchscreen device or a mouse, so you no longer need to scan in the signature and then upload that. And there certainly are new features and enhancements which are routinely being released in response to feedback that we're receiving as that new ENVD is being used by our stakeholders. So, as I mentioned, there are a number of ENVD system updates being released on an ongoing basis. So some of the examples of some updates that we've released just in the last couple of months, there's now a mixed sex option for sheep, lamb and goat consignments, as well as a cow and calf section. Sex option, so conscious that we've probably got a lot of mixed farmers on the call. There's the new LPA NVD version 0720 has been incorporated into the new ENVD platform. The look and feel of the movement information page has been updated, and a number of performance issues, including screen errors and the like, have also been resolved. There's a whole heap of things in the pipeline in terms of improving it. It's about improving that customer experience and continuous improvement based on feedback that we receive. Things like the new cattle health declaration, MSA forms, if you're an MSA producer, will be integrated into the new platform. There's also the ability coming up to complete a practice consignment for first-time users, or if you're wanting to do training with your own staff, as well as bug fixes. And another little integrity insight there, as I said, lots of updates are being released continuously to the ENVD platform, and these updates are about improving that overall experience for producers and others that need to interact with the integrity system. These updates are all listed on the ISC website, and absolutely we rely on your feedback. So we welcome your feedback in terms of your experience and how you found using the ENVD. So please send that through to us when you can. So I do believe that I've got a text here. So this is a multi-skilling on next level tonight. So Dee, how's Jo going? Are you right to take back over?
Jo is good. She's going to launch us into the practical tips section. So back to you, Jo.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. I feel full because Kathleen had to present at the New South Wales webinar today. So she's already given her voice a really good workout. So I'm trying to give her a rest. Okay, so something I did forget to mention in the LPA slide earlier on, so for your LPA NVDs, that if you haven't ever ordered them online before, that is the preferred way, I guess. You're still welcome to call the ISC help desk and place your order, but you can definitely log on to your LPA account and you can place your order there to get your new NVD book. And that's also where you access the ENVD. So some tips on how to fill out the NVDs on the go. So I guess, yeah, the first one is fill out as much as you can before you go to the yards, because everyone knows when you're down at the yards, everything happens, things go wrong. There's just things going on. So if you've got as much as you can filled out before you get there, then it's going to make the whole thing easier. Also, don't find out when you're at the yards that you're on the last page or you don't have any pages left in your book. And if you do, run home and log on and use the new ENVD. It's really important that you keep your LPA records up to date, because that information is what helps you answer those questions, so that guarantee to the consumers that you are managing all of those things on your farm all rely on that accurate record keeping. So make sure that you are keeping that up to date. And as we said a few times, you do need to keep your NVDs. So you need to keep a copy as part of your records. And the paper copies, I think, for most places, need to be kept for 7 years. And the ENVDs, if you've fully completed them online, then they're saved, and they're saved online for you. But if you've had to stop and print them out part way, and then some of it's been completed by hand, then you will need to keep those paper copies as you would with your book. And as we've said a few times, you also need to make sure that the transfers has been completed on the NLIS database. Okay, so if you haven't used the NLIS database much, then we do have quite a number of tech tips that have been around for a fair while. But the exciting news is that some of those tech tips, quite a few of them are being batched up, and there will be some new resources on helping you navigate and use the NLIS database available soon. So as we've said, please check the database when there's been transfers have been completed to make sure, first of all, did the right number get transferred, and has it been transferred from or to the right pick? Because fixing up and making sure things have happened straight away is a lot easier than 6 to 12 months down the track when you're trying to sort this all out. So there is within the NLIS database, there is it does cover an early warning status. Basically, this is assigned to properties that carry high risk animals. It doesn't specifically identify the animals, but it does alert people to the fact, or producers and buyers and the supply chain, that there is a risk animal on that property. And it does help you monitor and manage your biosecurity risk for your farm, and make a decision about whether you actually want to purchase from that pick. So these statuses are listed on the NLIS database, and there is a fact sheet that you can access from the database that explains all about early warning statuses. So we've mentioned quite a bit about record keeping, and it's really important that you do align your record keeping to the requirements, or the 7 requirements for LPA. Now, there are templates available, and they're great, and a lot of people use the templates. But if you already have a way of keeping your records, you don't need to throw all that out and then download the templates. And it's not a rigid system where you have to use the templates. But if you are going to use a different system, please look at the templates to make sure that whatever system you're using is capturing all that required information. You might be keeping it in paddock books. You might be using a spreadsheet. You might be using on-farm software. So there's no one perfect way to keep your records, but do make sure that you are keeping all the information that is required. Because of the Accelerated Adoption Initiative at the moment, you can order a copy of the LPA recording template booklet, which includes a template for every one of those 7 requirements. So if you're record keeping, you're thinking, oh, I don't know if it's quite up to scratch, then yeah, please order one of these record keeping templates, because it will get posted out to you, and then you can have it all completed and filled in. And if you do happen to get selected for a random audit, you'll have everything ready to go. So there's lots of tips to make record keeping easier. And some of these ideas that we've got from other producers, they're just little tips that can make things make things not so onerous. So one of the things is recording that batch number and expiry date of all the treatments that you give your animals. If you forget if you a serial person that forgets to write that down every time, a simple thing you can do is, when you purchase it from the supplier, ask them to print it onto your invoice, because generally you'll know what product was used for what group of animals, and you'll have that information probably recorded in your diary. And so you just need the batch number, expiry date. If it's on the invoice, you can go back and retrieve that information if you do need to for an audit. Use your phone. I guess everyone has a digital a phone in their pocket these days. We're all taking photos all the time, so put that to your advantage, and use the phone to take photos of that information on the box. If you're down the yards and you're treating animals, get a photo of the animals that are being treated. and then you've got the date stamped with the product and the animals and the date, and that is your record. Just make sure that you upload that, save that somewhere, so that if you drop your phone in the trough, that all those good records are not lost. When you're purchasing fodder or hay, so it is a requirement that when you purchase in fodder, not the commercially produced, like, you know, pallets you get from Landmark or whatever, but if you're purchasing fodder or hay or grain, you do need to have a commodity vendor declaration for that, which is basically the document that states that fodder is free from chemical contaminants and it's safe for the food supply chain. So often it is difficult to get these from suppliers, but if they don't have one, you are quite within your rights to print off a copy, which you can access from our website, and you can ask that supplier to fill it in. So they might not be bothered to go and do that for you, but if you give them the document and all they've got to do is fill in a few boxes and sign it, then usually they're quite happy to do so. So now we're going to cover some of the tips around audits. I guess the main point about if you are selected for an audit is please don't panic and think that it's going to be some terrible experience. So it's all about helping you identify areas where you can make some improvements on how you're managing your farm and your animals and getting that into align with the requirements for the program. So I hope you've got the idea that the really big part of the audit is your record keeping, because basically that's the only way an auditor is able to see what's been happening on your property. So you need those records and that's what they will review. And so you need to make sure they're accurate and up to date. Now, something that a lot of producers overlook when they're preparing for an audit, because it's a fairly new requirement in LPA, is what they need to have in place to meet the requirements for animal welfare. Now, every species has Australian industry welfare standards and guidelines, and that's a copy of the cover of the document for goats. And you do need to have accessed and read and be aware of this document. You don't have to have a physical copy. You just need to know where to find it. You need to know what information it contains. And part of demonstrating that you understand that document is that you've completed the animal welfare module or the LPA learning module on the LPA website, which will generate you a certificate to say, yes, you have read and you've demonstrated that you understand what this document contains. So it is important that anyone who works on your property, who is responsible for animals, has had access or is aware of what is contained in this document as well. So we do, as I said, Integrity Systems Company is really, we're really working to make sure that there is plenty of resources and information, and that we give you the best possible opportunity to stand by what you sell. So there is a heaps of information on our website. If you haven't been receiving our monthly Integrity Matters newsletter, then you can subscribe. There's a link to subscribe at the bottom of our website homepage. And we also do disseminate quite a bit of information through the social and digital, the standard channels of Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We've developed quite a number of, I guess, both online and sort of hard copy resources. And a big component of these new resources have been animations. So the ENVD How to Complete and the new NVD How to Complete animations have been given a good run on social media. So if you haven't watched those, then I really suggest you have a look at them. They're not long, and they just cover key ways of how you can do that properly. The LPA learning modules, which sit on the both on the ISC website you can access, or through the LPA website. They cover all the 7 requirements for LPA. There's heaps of FAQs. We've got lots of fact sheets and then the record keeping templates that I mentioned earlier. And yes, we do have a help desk that's manned during office hours, and that you're always welcome to give them a call and they'll help you out if they can. So we did mention at the start, earlier at the agenda, I mentioned that there was a thing called MyMLA. So if you haven't yet signed up for MyMLA, I'd really strongly encourage you to do so, because it does simplify life. Because the key thing it does is gives you one username and password to access all your Integrity program accounts. So if you're like me and you've got, and everyone has hundreds of username and passwords, and it's just a pain to try and remember them all. Once you've linked your NLIS, your LPA, you can also include your MSA and your LDL if you have it. You can link all of those accounts together, and you only need to remember that one username and password. So it not only gives you access to all of those accounts, it also then gives you, lets you set up this customized dashboard. You can see an example of it on the screen, and you can add or take away whatever components you want to that dashboard, and you can access all of the MLA prices and markets information, and you can just tailor that to whatever you're particularly interested in. So what species, what selling system over the hooks or through the sale yards, which location. So it's a great little tool to have, and it does give you that easy access to the programs. So finally, just a disclaimer. So the NVD is a declaration. We can't do it for you, but we are here to help. So I hope some of those tools and tips have given you some ideas of how you can better comply with the requirements that you need to in the red meat integrity system. And there's a lot more information that we do have, as I've mentioned, and we'll be following this up with access to all the things that we've mentioned in a follow-up email. I'm sure Deanna will cover that in her closing remarks.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. Virtual round of applause for you. And thank you, Kathleen, for hopping in. That is why we have an understudy, just in case, internet drops out or, we get tickles in the throat. Now, thank you to everyone on the call. We have had some really great questions, and you have been putting Team ISC through their paces. Lots of great questions. So thank you for that. Now, just before we get to some more questions, just in the chat, which is down the bottom next to the Q&A, I just want to draw everyone's attention to that little survey link that I mentioned at the start. It only takes a couple of minutes. It's very short. We would really love your feedback on whether this way of getting information is most useful for you. And please hit us up with comments about time of day and days of the week, goat specific or not. We would love to hear your feedback. Right, now questions. Now I'm conscious that we have been going for about an hour, so if you do need to rush off, we are still recording, and we will provide this recording link to you. So I would really love to cover some of the questions that we had in the pre-registration, because we did have some really, really good ones. So Damon, I think we are going to start with you if we can. Now we realise that there are very state-by-state differences when it comes to NVDs, but can you just make a comment about how long we need to be keeping those NVD copies for?
Yeah, thanks, Dee. Specifically for NVDs for the LPA programs, 3 years, but the majority of the states are 7, so 7 years in total. So I'll just double check what state you're in to confirm, but the majority are 7 years. But yeah, for us it's 3.
Great, thank you. And while you're at it, can you just make a comment about the transfer requirements in each state?
Regarding goats?
Yes.
So obviously there are requirements that do differ. Again, I would recommend identifying those in your state. However, the majority are 48 hours. So once you move those animals, but I would double check in your state. Great,
thank you. And just finally, so in the webinar series, we have had a lot of people asking about, why isn't there a box to tick for grass-fed only on an NVD or antibiotic-free, etc. Can you just make a comment about, why some of these things are on the NVD in the first place?
Yeah, I think it's good to remember the intent of the NVD. It's very much a food safety document. So obviously we're talking history of animals, we're talking vaccinations, we're talking what animals have been fed. It's around trying to minimise the risk of contamination to those animals prior to them reaching the supply chain. So it's realistically about saying, well, record those on farm, make sure you're looking that up prior to moving those animals. But secondly, obviously, there are programs that specifically identify grass-fed, grain-fed as well. So that sits separate to the intent of the NBD itself.
Awesome. Thanks, Damon. Lisa Barrios, we might just come over to you. Now, Joe did mention that if you get a notice about an audit, don't panic. Are you able to just make a comment perhaps about what producers can expect during an audit and maybe some of the things they should have in preparation?
Yeah, thanks, Dee. So yeah, definitely a very good comment around not being scared or not being apprehensive about an audit. The auditor is just there to review and assist you in working out what LPA documentation it is that you have on farm, and if there is anything that needs to be rectified or improved based on your operation to maintain your LPA accreditation. And therefore, what we require through the 7 LPA requirements is basically being aware and understanding of all the risks that are involved that we identify through biosecurity, animal welfare, but also record keeping through any animal treatments or chemical treatments that may occur on the farm, as well as your NLIS transactions and movements. So keeping records up to date. We've had a few questions tonight in relation to animal treatments and chemical treatments. So just in recording those specific elements of, say, the actual product that you're using, and making sure that they're all recorded with the specific criteria that we outline in the LPA record keeping templates. We have a number of templates that you can use from our ISC website, or you can use your own templates as long as you're including all of the required information on those.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Now, we are still getting some questions in the Q&A chat box. So if you still have questions for a written response, please pop them in there. Now, Emily Litso, we might just come over to you. We did have a pre-registration question. That was this. We are starting out and have a MyMLA account, but I'd like to know where the best and clearest information is regarding goat production. So can you just give us a quick snapshot as to some of the things that MLA has on offer for the goat producers?
Sure. So we've actually got quite a bit of information that's targeted at producers wanting to get into goats. So we've got a Going Into Goats guide, which is an information package designed to explain the processes of a goat production system. So that's available on the MLA website. We've also got a section of the website called Give Goats a Go, and that has sources and tools developed with producers for producers to answer commonly asked questions. And then we've also got a quarterly newsletter book called Goats on the Move that you can sign up to through the MLA website, which provides tips, tools and updates on the latest research that's going on in MLA and producer case studies. If you can't find these and want links to them, feel free to send an email to myself or through MLA, and we can get the information to you.
Great, thanks, Emily. So we'll include some of those links in our post-webinar email, which people will get tomorrow. So that'll be really handy. Now we'll cross to the other Emily Duncanson, who is all things ENVD. So Emily, a couple of questions here. So can you change the details on an ENVD if there are changes just before loading, such as a change in the stock number or the stock type?
Hi Dee, yes, you can. So we've designed ENVD to have a lot of flexibility, and specifically for those users that are quite used to the EDEX system. And we understand that that's often the case where there is details of the LPA NBD that are left until the very last minute, until you can be sure of those answers. So things like the movement date, livestock description and transporter details can all be updated after the consignment's submitted in the ENVD platform. And so what this enables you to do is basically pre-fill all of your questions, all of the other sections, and then just fill out those potentially changing details at the end. And obviously there's a couple of ways that you can go about that. If you've submitted the consignment and you don't have connectivity at your yards of or place of loading, your best and safest bet is to print that ENVD at the time, and then you can enter those final details on the written copy. Otherwise, you can also update those figures from your mobile device in the ENVD platform after you've loaded those livestock.
Great, thanks, Emily. And also, if the destination address is incorrect or incomplete, what do we do then when it comes to the ENVD?
Yeah, so just like any regular LPA NVD, it's very important that you get the destination correct. So if you do find that you have it incorrect, again, we've made ENVD quite quick and easy for you to restart another consignment, either using a template or duplicating the one that the incorrect one, and being able to just update those particular details that you need to, including the destination. And obviously, if you've already submitted and printed that consignment, you will just need to update the printed copy like you would any regular hard copy. So that is, make the amendment to the destination and make sure that you've signed that amendment. And essentially, we've tried to make it just as easy as possible for you guys to do things quickly. So I think my advice would be to just start again, but use a template and you'll be done in no time.
Thanks, Em. Now, obviously, connectivity is an issue in regional Australia. So are you able to just make a comment about what we do with the ENVD when there is no internet connection, and maybe just give us a snapshot of what's coming up in the future?
No problem. So at the moment, the ENVD system that we've released has been designed around the foundational use of the program. And what I mean by that is that it's designed specifically for creators, so producers. And what we're moving into now is looking at how those creators are transferring ENVDs and the various scenarios in which they hand off consignments to transporters, to the receivers, like sale yards, abattoirs, feedlots, etc. And really coming up with solutions for how they can do that just as easily and simply as they can create the consignments. So at the moment, ENVD is quite connectivity dependent. As I said, we've designed it with a lot of flexibility, so you can print at any time, and that enables you to take control of that consignment when you need to, if there is no connectivity. However, in the next 6 to 12 months, we'll be really taking a deep dive into developing rather a offline capability. So what that means is that everyone that creates LPA NVDs and other consignment forms will be able to access all these same features in an offline environment, and really, I guess, ensure that all of our user requirements are met, users of LPA NVDs. So that's watch this space one. There'll be a number of solutions that we'll look to implement, most likely including things like mobile native apps, Bluetooth transfer of information, SMSs when required, and those kinds of things. So yeah, it's an exciting space, and we'll be working pretty hard in the next little while.
Awesome, thanks, Em. Exciting indeed. Do watch this space. Now, Kathleen, a couple of questions for you. Now, sometimes there is confusion around whether all of this integrity system stuff applies to small producers, hobby farms, whether you've got 1 or 2 goats as pets. So can you just make a comment, please, about who does all of this integrity system stuff apply to?
Thanks, Dee, and what fantastic questions we're getting on the line tonight. So absolutely, the integrity system for the Australian livestock industry, which includes goats, applies to absolutely all goat producers if you are selling those goats. So whether or not you have one pet goat with a name, through to thousands of rangelands goats in a feedlot or a depot, for example, then the integrity system requirements apply to you. So if you are a small goat producer with a couple of goats that are essentially pets, at some point, if they are going to be sold, then absolutely you will need to make sure that you comply with all those requirements, including tagging and the paperwork that goes with them to be sold. So that is the National Vendor Declaration. So, however, we do recognise that if you are a small producer, this can be a little bit overwhelming, which is why we're doing programs like this, so that we can outline what that the programs are and what your requirements are, and to help you. And there, as Joe said, there's a range of tools and resources to help you meet your requirements, and you can certainly reach out to us at any time, including to the help desk, and we can help you get through that process.
So thanks, Kathleen. So while we're going then, just to recap on some of those fundamentals when it comes to NLIS. So whose responsibility is it to do the transfer on the NLIS database?
So the transfer for the NLIS database is with the receiver of the animal. So the producer that receives those animals is accountable for that. And that's really important, that if you are, if at a sale yard they're doing the transfer for you, or if you're working privately with a livestock agent and they've indicated that they will do that transfer for you, you're still ultimately responsible for that. So it's important that you do double check. So the receiver is responsible for the transfer.
So what happens if the receiver or the person or the buyer, what happens if they don't do the transfer?
If the receiver doesn't do the transfer, well, then they need to follow that up, and they need to log in and make sure that they have met those requirements, because as Joe indicated, your transfers certainly are an auditable requirement as part of the LPA program, for example. So really important that you do that, and that you don't then get found that you haven't done those transfers if you are audited.
Okay. And just to be clear, if someone is adjusting goats somewhere else, maybe on a neighbouring property or a property in another state, are they meant to be doing something there when it comes to the database?
Yes, absolutely. So unless the two different properties have the same PIC, which would be very unlikely and very rare, that certainly if you are adjusting any livestock, sheep, cattle or goats, then if those animals are being moved from property to property, then those requirements still apply, including having the NLIS transfer registered on the database.
And so if producers buy stock privately through an agent, who does the update on the NLIS database then?
So that really is a personal relationship that you would have with the agent, for example. So if the agent does offer to do that, then that's great. However, as I said before, it's your responsibility, and it's a requirement that the receiver that transfer has been completed. So it certainly is worthwhile that you double check that has actually occurred.
Great, thank you, Kathleen. Just to clarify some of those responsibilities there. Now I'm conscious that we're nearing 8:50 here in Central Zone. So I'm just going to put out a last call for questions. We've got the ISC team just typing out some answers to those last ones there. We'll also just draw everyone's attention back to the chat. If you can please just click on that little link there and give us some feedback, that will really help in guiding our strategy in rolling out future webinars for goat producers. Now, Katie Davies, we might just get a comment from you as our last person to ask a question to, if that's okay. So you're obviously a goat producer, and see a lot of this policy making through GEICA. Do you have any comments about GEICA's view on the importance of integrity systems as a whole?
Thanks, Deanna. Yeah, the integrity systems underpins our entire industry, along with sheep and cattle. So integrity systems gives us that ability to go out to our markets and give that integrity system underpinning. I know I'm repeating myself, but it's allowing the market to understand that our produce in Australia has been produced at the highest standard, We have clean grain protein. And the integrity system gives our market just that confidence to go forward and take our product and know that we all stand by what we sell. And that's what it's all about. And GEICA supports, you know, all the goat producers in Australia, to make sure that you can get involved in NLIS and make sure that you're doing the right thing. And if you need any help, just you can reach out to GEICA, you can reach out to ISC. We've got all these great people on the webinar this evening. But yeah, by standing by what you sell ensures that we've got a market to sell our incredible product that we have in Australia.
Awesome, thanks Katie. We'll also include some contact detail links for GEICA as well. So if you don't have those, keep an eye out for that email tomorrow. So we are just finishing up on the Q&A. Joe Gangemi, we might come back to you just to have the last word. Any closing comments, words of wisdom from yourself?
Thanks, Dee. Just thanks again to everyone for joining tonight and staying through. And we've gone a little bit over time. And I think it's a great option to be able to throw your answers up there and have them answered straight away. And also, if you will provide that as a follow-up. So if you didn't see the answer to something you saw a question for, you will get that. So thank you to everyone. Thank you very much to the Brains Trust, everyone staying up and giving up their night time to assist providing the answers for the webinar. It's great to have all that information, all that knowledge to call on. And thank you very much, Dee, for once again being a great host.
Not a problem. Thank you, Joe. So finally, please put your thoughts in the survey question. We've got a few question and answers left here, so we're just going to finish tapping out a response to those. But if we don't get to them before the webinar closes, they will be in the post-webinar email in your inbox tomorrow. There'll be a link in there with a transcript of all the questions. Thank you so much to everyone for asking all of those great questions. We really do appreciate it. Thanks to everyone on the call tonight who've been answering the questions. We really do appreciate it. So that's it from us. We're just going to leave the webinar open for 1 minute longer, so you can click on that evaluation link. But otherwise, thanks all for your attendance. Thanks for sticking with us as we've gone a bit over time, and have a good evening.